Hey everyone, Jake here for American Trucks, and in this video we're taking a look at this Rough Country 3-inch suspension lift kit with the front M1 monotube struts and the rear M1 monotube shocks, fitting 2012 to 2018 Ram 1500s without air ride. If you are looking for a comprehensive way to get more height for off-roading or just to fit larger wheels and tires at a more budget-friendly price, you're going to want to check out this kit. This is a bolt-on, all-inclusive lift kit that's going to get you 3 inches of extra height, and it's also going to level out the stance of your truck while maintaining good ride quality and the correct suspension geometry. So you get the look and clearance that you want with the manners and performance to match. Now there is a lot to cover here, so let's start with the overall height. Again, this is going to be a 3-inch lift, so it's going to provide you enough clearance to run some larger tires on your truck as well. Most 33-inch tires are going to fit on here with no issue, but those of you who are running a really wide, say 10-inch and up wheel, or ones with really aggressive offsets, might need to do a little bit of trimming to avoid some minor rubbing issues. And of course, if you want to go any larger than a 33, further modifications or a larger lift kit will be required. Now starting out up front right here, you get a set of Rough Country's heavy-duty upper control arms. Now these are forged aluminum arms, and they include new Clevite rubber bushings, so they're going to provide excellent absorption of road impacts. They're also pretty lightweight because they're aluminum, but they've got a lot of structural integrity, enough to hold up to whatever abuse you might be able to throw at them. Now you might have also noticed here that the ball joints are angled, and that's to accommodate for that lift. So despite adding quite a bit of height, these are going to keep things pretty close to your factory suspension geometry, which is going to help maintain that factory type of ride quality, provide you a full range of motion, and make sure that everything is going to work properly so you can take advantage of that added ride height. Also up front, you get a set of Rough Country's loaded M1 struts. Now these are going to combine with the control arms to give you 3 inches of lift in the front end. As you can see, these come pre-assembled, so you don't need to mess around with spring compressors for the sake of assembly, just bolt them right on in. Now these also feature the ability to adjust the ride height, so should you want to lower them down later, you've got the option to do that, though it will require some disassembly. Now you can't really see it too well, but there is an adjustable collar in here. You can move this down. There's different rungs on the body of the shock, so it'll move this spring perch down, thus giving you a bit of a lower height. Again, that's going to require some disassembly, but these come out of the box set at the full height, so to give you that 3-inch lift, and you can just bolt them right on in. Now these are one of Rough Country's more premium shock options. They feature nitrogen charging and infinitely variable damping, so it's going to give you as smooth, almost stock type of ride quality, though a bit more firm. Now these are designed specifically for lifted applications, so the damping is tuned to keep the ride smooth out on the road, and they have self-adjusting deflective disc valves inside for independent rebound and compression adjustments, which is all done automatically. You don't have to do anything. So again, these are going to do a really good job of absorbing impacts and controlling rebound out on the street or trail. And that nitrogen charging also helps with heat dissipation as well. So even under really aggressive off-roading conditions, if you're hitting a washboard type of situation, these aren't going to suffer from fade. And that just means that you can use them to their full extent without having to worry about them fading or losing control. Now in the rear, we've got a set of spacers that are going to help give you that extra height and get the rear of your truck nice and level to match up to the front. So you're going to get about a 2.5-inch lift overall in the rear, again functioning as a leveling kit to even out the stance of your truck. You also get a set of Rough Country's M1 monotube shocks to keep everything in check and maintain good ride quality, and of course to match the front. Now like the front struts, these are nitrogen charged and feature that infinitely variable damping, so again it's going to give you that smooth, almost stock ride quality. However, you can tell when you pull these out of the box, they are a bit more firm than stock. But again, this is going to give you good ride quality, and then you've got a nice matched set of shocks both front and rear. Construction here is all quite solid. Now, as I mentioned, the control arms up front are made from forged aluminum for strength and weight savings. As you can see, there's no seams or welds to break on here, so you can be sure that they're strong. You've got those Clevite rubber bushings, brand new ball joints, and I popped this off before I started the video. The ball joints are greasable. They've got Zerk fittings right here on top. Now both the front struts and the rear shocks are going to have an absolutely massive 2-inch extruded tube with a 45mm bore and an 18mm hardened chrome piston rod. So these are really solid pieces. Those measurements are actually quite big. We see a lot of suspension come through here, and finding an 18mm piston rod on something is rare. Most of them are a lot smaller than this. Now the bodies of the shocks, both front and rear, are finished in the zinc plating for good looks and durability. You also get new top hats and springs up front, and those aforementioned spacers in the rear are a heavy duty composite material that's super strong and super lightweight. Pricing for this kit comes in at about $1,200, and for all you're getting here, that is a really competitive price. Of course, there are less expensive options, but they're not going to have all the features like the hefty shocks and control arms. Now you could spend more on another kit, but for a truck that's going to see mixed street and trail usage, this is going to be an excellent option because it'll give you good damping both out on the street and out on the trail, and it's not really going to compromise. In fact, about the only compromise you're going to have to make will be when it comes to installation. We are going to give this kit a 3 out of 3 on our difficulty meter, and it's likely going to take you upwards of 6 hours to complete. Now you can certainly do this at home in your driveway, especially since everything you need to get the job done is included, but it is an involved job. Now, if you aren't necessarily comfortable disassembling a lot of suspension components, professional installation is always an option. But this is a job that you can do at home, and you don't need to modify anything on the truck to get this installed. You're just gonna have to disassemble a bunch of stuff. But once you get everything disassembled, just bolt it right back on and you're ready to hit the road. Although I will tell you, of course, make sure you get your truck aligned once you've got everything buttoned up and given it a day or so to settle. With that though, let's head out to the shop where we'll walk you through the process.
The tools you'll need for this project are a 1/2-inch impact gun, a 1/2-inch drive ratchet, a 3/8 drive ratchet, an 8mm, a 21mm socket, a short 3/8 extension, an 8mm Allen head wrench, a 14, a 15, a 16, an 18, a 21, and a 15/16 wrench. And you'll also need a modified 21mm wrench or a 21mm crow's foot, a ball peen hammer, and a pry bar. Hi everyone, today we're installing a lift kit on our Ram pickup, but before we get started with the uninstall, first thing I want to let you know is you are going to need a specialized tool. Now you'll either need to have a specially modified 21mm wrench, or you're going to need a 21mm crow's foot. And a crow's foot is basically just the end of the wrench here with a opening in the top of it here for a ratchet or an extension for a ratchet. Now you will need this in order to remove the upper rear shock mount bolts. So before you get started with that, make sure you've got this in hand. Now we can go ahead and get started with the uninstall. So let's watch a short video on how to uninstall the rear springs.
All right, to kick off the uninstall in the rear, we've got our Ram up in the air, and I have 2 pole jacks supporting our rear axle. Now, if you're working on the ground, you'll want a hydraulic jack under the pumpkin or the differential, or you can put 2 hydraulic jacks, one on both sides of the differential. Now, that's gonna help support the weight. As we disconnect some suspension components, that's gonna hold that up, and then we'll slowly lower both sides down to release the tension on the spring in order to insert our leveling kit. Now, with that out of the way, I have an 18mm ratcheting wrench, which is gonna go a long way to help us get this off. And I also have a 1/4-inch ratchet with an 8mm socket. I'm gonna first focus on disconnecting our sway bar end link. Now, I'm not gonna disconnect the side connecting it to the frame. I'm gonna disconnect the sway bar from the end link. That's an 8mm nut. Now, the reason I have both of these in my hand is because once I start loosening this up, the entire stud likes to spin. To get around that, I'm gonna put my 18mm ratcheting wrench on our nut here, and I'm gonna put the 8mm socket on the end to hold the stud steady. And then I'm gonna loosen this guy up. That way, stud stays still and we can get the nut off. For the rear with a solid rear axle, you're gonna do both sides at the same time. Take it off by hand. Now what I like to do is once that's disconnected, pull the end link out. What I like to do is just put the nut on the end just so we don't lose it. So now we're gonna do this on the other side. All right, and with that other side out of the way, the sway bar is free, you can swing that down. Next up, we're gonna disconnect our panhard bar. Now the panhard bar connects the axle to the frame. So it's connected to the axle on our driver's side and the frame on the passenger. So we only have to do one side. Just gotta get it disconnected from one or the other. So I'm gonna start here. Now this bolt goes all the way through and has a nut on the other side with a tab. So because of that tab, we're not gonna need to hold the nut side. That'll hit the frame and hold itself. So I'm gonna use a 21mm socket to get this guy off. So the nut came off. There we go, and that's free. All right, now on the opposite side of our coil spring is our shock. We need to disconnect the shock from the bottom here where the 21mm bolt goes through. Now I've got a 21mm wrench holding on our nut and my 21 socket on the bolt head side. All right, so now we can just repeat that on the other side to tackle the shock bolt. All right, at this point, the only thing keeping this axle up right now are these two pole jacks. Now again, if you're working on the ground, you'll have a hydraulic jack most likely. If that is the case, this is the part we're gonna start decompressing. So we're gonna slowly lower these pole jacks down one by one to evenly bring this down and decompress our spring. Now again, if you're using that hydraulic jack, don't send it. You wanna make sure you're going very slowly decompressing it. Otherwise, these things can get a little violent shooting out of their spot. So slowly decompress and then we'll pop the spring off. So I do a couple of turns on one side because now this is uneven. I'll do the other side and kind of bring it down incrementally. All right, once it starts decompressing, you'll start to hear a little bit of creaking coming from the coils. That's letting you know it's close to fully decompressed, and you just saw it fall out. So this guy's completely loose and we're good to bring her down. Same thing on the other side. Once you can twist it, there's no more pressure or tension on it. So now at this point, we're just bringing it down low enough that we can get the spring actually out. All right, there you have it. All right, next step here, we're gonna get our spring out of place. And that rubber isolator at the top looks like this. Just wanna make sure that's still here.
Now that we've got our springs removed, let's go ahead and finish removing the rear shock. Now to do that, what we're gonna have to do is remove our fender liner here. And to do that, we've got 10 screws, 8 of them that go along the front of the fender lip right here. And then we've got 2 on the sides. Now we're missing a couple of screws, but yours should still be there. So to remove our bolts, what we're gonna do is use our 8mm socket, get them all out of the way. Once we've got their bolts removed, we can go ahead and remove our fender liner. Now to remove our fender liner, what we're gonna do is just grab it in the front here, push it in so that we can get it past the lip here on the fender, and then just start peeling it out. All right, now that we've exposed our upper shock bolt, there's really no way to get in behind it with a wrench or a socket, which is why we talked about the specialized tool earlier. So what we're gonna do is we're going to use our 21mm wrench, put it behind, and put it around the nut that's behind that bolt. Now we'll use our 21mm socket to loosen up the bolt from this side while we hold the nut with our wrench. Now we can go ahead and pull our bolt out and remove our shock. And now you can repeat that process for the other side. Now we're ready to install the spring spacer in the rear. And along with that comes this retaining plate that's going to sit on top of the spring pocket welded to the frame. And then you're going to put the spacer underneath where the spring would go and secure it using the supplied Allen bolt. So let's go ahead and get this started. So we'll place our spring plate on top of the spring pocket, put our bolt through the spacer, and then using an 8mm Allen wrench, we're going to go ahead and secure this bolt to the plate we just installed. And we'll go ahead and tighten that down. And you may have to use a 14 millimeter wrench to hold the nut on the retaining plate to get this secured. Now with the spacer secured, we'll go ahead and install the isolator from our spring underneath. And now we can install our spring. Now, I also recommend that you install, especially if you're doing this on the ground using a floor jack, to install both springs at the same time so that you can get them secured so that they don't fall out while you're adjusting everything else. Now we're ready to go ahead and install our upper shock mount, making sure, of course, that you notice that on the shock it is labeled as top here, so the body of the shock is going to be on top as opposed to on the bottom. So we'll go ahead and put this back in, and using our original hardware, and we'll reach back behind with our nut, get it attached. And now using our specialized 21 millimeter wrench and our 21 millimeter socket, we'll go ahead and tighten that down. All right, now we'll go ahead and reinstall our spring, making sure that it sits in the isolator at the top. And sits on the post at the bottom. All right, now we're ready to go ahead and raise up our differential so that we can go ahead and attach our panhard bar. Now you want to make sure that your springs are properly seated in their perches, and then we'll just go ahead and slowly raise our differential and get this back into place. All right, once you've got your holes lined up, go ahead and reinstall your original hardware. And now we'll tighten our bolt down with our 21 millimeter socket. All right, now we can go ahead and reconnect our sway bar. We'll do both sides at once. And then we'll tighten them down using our 18 millimeter wrench and our 8 millimeter socket. Now we'll do the other side. Now we can go ahead and attach our lower shock mount. You may have to raise your differential up to line up the holes. Reinstall the original hardware. All right, now we can go ahead and tighten it down using our 21 millimeter socket and our 21 millimeter wrench. And now you can repeat that process for the other side. All right, now that we've got everything installed, we can go ahead and install our wheel well liner. And once we've got our wheel liner back in place, we'll go ahead and reinstall the original hardware. And now we'll tighten them all down with our 8 millimeter socket. And now you can repeat that process for the other side. And as always, anytime you do suspension work, make sure you torque everything back down to factory recommended specifications, and always take it in to get in alignment before you try driving it on the road. And now let's watch a short video on how to uninstall the front strut.
All right, to kick things off, I'm going to show you guys how to uninstall your factory strut here on our front driver's side. Now, of course, you want to get your wheel out of the way. That's step number one. We're supported on a lift, but if you're working on the floor, make sure you have a floor jack properly supporting the weight of the vehicle. Moving on from there, we'll have to disconnect the ABS lines from the knuckle and from the brake line itself, just to make sure that when the knuckle drops down out of the upper control arm, we're not putting too much stress on those brake lines. All right, so for this ABS line, just follow it down to the back of your knuckle here. That's connected with a plastic clip. Just gonna wiggle that back and forth till it pops up. Now you wanna follow that guy up to the top here. That's connected to your brake line. That you're just gonna pull apart just like that. Now we have more slack on our brake line, so we're not putting tension on them. Next up, grab a 16mm deep socket, and we're gonna remove the factory nut off of our sway bar end link. All right, set that aside. All right, next up, we're gonna disconnect our tie rod end. Now, before we get started, you wanna know that this is a 21mm nut. Now, in some cases, if you use an impact gun on this, the entire stud will spin in that ball joint. You may need a 10mm socket and a 21mm wrench to get the nut off while holding that stud steady. For our first time, I'm gonna use our 21mm deep socket in my air gun to get this guy off. All right, so ours didn't give us any trouble, but that is still worth noting. Now, before I take this guy out, I'm actually gonna leave it in and just put that nut a couple of threads on just to keep the entire hub assembly from rotating while tackling the upper control arm. All right, so next we're gonna do the upper control arm to the knuckle. Now, Ram uses a castle nut here, which has these open gaps all the way around, and through one of the gaps, going through the stud itself, is a metal retaining pin. We're gonna use needle nose pliers to pull that pin straight out. All right, set that aside. Now for this, I'm gonna use an 18mm ratcheting wrench. I highly recommend picking up a set of ratcheting wrenches for this install. There's a lot of different aspects of this that ratcheting wrenches will be a lot easier to use. All right, so once we broke that loose, I can back this off with my hand. Now, big thing to remember is we have to dislodge the ball joint from the knuckle. You can see that this stud didn't break free with that. So I'm gonna leave this nut on a couple of threads. We're gonna grab our hammer and we're gonna swing and tap against here to dislodge that. And then we'll use a pry bar to pull it down and take our nut off. Now for this, you're gonna grab a ball peen hammer and we're gonna tap right up against the side here of the knuckle. With that dislodged, you'll see that the upper control arm moves freely in there. Let's take our nut off. Once you have the castle nut and spacer out, set those aside. All right, so from here we can go back to the tie rod end, take that nut off, lift the tie rod end out. And I like to hang it up over that sway bar end link and then put our nut back on the stud just so we don't lose it. Here we can lift the upper control arm out of the knuckle. And what I like to do is just grab the upper control arm castle nut and thread it right back on again so we don't lose it, just like the tie rod end. All right, next up, we're gonna tackle the bottom strut bolt, holding it to the lower control arm. Now the nut here, I'm gonna use a 15/16 deep socket on my impact gun, and I'm gonna use a 21mm wrench to hold the bolt head on the inside. At this point, you can grab a ball peen hammer and just tap the end of that to pop it through. Some cases you may be able to pull it straight out. If not, you can grab a flathead screwdriver and just stick it in there and hammer the back end of that. All right, so now we can focus on the top three strut tower nuts. Now grab a 15mm wrench, and I'm gonna use again the 15mm ratcheting wrench. Again, this really comes in handy. We're gonna loosen up these three top nuts. All right, so now our strut is free. I'm gonna use a pry bar here between the lower control arm and the strut body at the bottom to pry this guy out of position.
Now that we've got our strut out of the way, we can go ahead and remove the 2 bolts that hold our control arm in at the top using our 18mm ratchet wrench. Now we can remove our control arm. Now that we're ready to install our strut, there's one thing I want to note before we actually get to that, is that these are height adjustable. However, the manufacturer does not recommending you adjust the height. It comes in at the highest height, which is the 3-inch advertised height difference. But in order, if you decide that you do want to lower the height, what you would have to do is put this into a spring compressor, remove the top hat here, lift up on the spring perch here, and then there's a clip that goes around the body of the strut. You'd have to take that off, move it to a different location, and then put the seat back on, reinstall the spring, and put the top hat back on. That being said, let's go ahead and get this installed. All right, so now we're just going to set the top of our strut up into the strut mount at the top. And we're going to loosely attach the supplied nuts just to hold it in place. Now we're going to need to use our pry bar to pry down on the lower control arm to fit in our new strut back into the lower mount. So we just push this in, get it into place, and now we can go ahead and insert the bolt in our lower strut mount. Now we'll go ahead and use our pry bar again to pry this down so that we can line up our strut with the mounting hole and slide that in. Now we go ahead and place our nut on that lower strut mount bolt, and using our 15/16 wrench and our 21mm socket, we'll go ahead and tighten that up. Now we'll go ahead and tighten down the 3 nuts at the top of our strut to secure those with our 15mm wrench. All right, now we can go ahead and install our upper control arm, keeping in mind, of course, that these are side specific. So if you look at them, you will notice that you've got one arm that is shorter than the other. So the shorter arm is going to go towards the back of the vehicle. So in this case, this is going to be the one for our driver's side. So we'll go ahead and put this into place and use the original hardware to secure it. All right, now we'll reinstall our nuts with the tabs on them. Now we go ahead and tighten up our 2 upper control arm bolts using our 18mm wrench. All right, now we go ahead and connect our steering knuckle back to our upper control arm. First thing we need to do is install this supplied spacer on the ball joint. All right, now we can go ahead and connect our steering knuckle back to our upper control arm. Now, the next thing we'll have to do is install this supplied spacer onto the ball joint stud and then connect the new nut that is also supplied. Now we can go ahead and tighten up our nut using our 21mm socket. Now we can reconnect our tie rod end. Using the original nut and tighten it with our 21mm socket. Now we can attach our sway bar links. Now you have to do this on both sides at the same time. So we'll just use our pry bar, push that down into position. We'll go ahead and put our washer back on top and our nut and tighten it down with our 16mm wrench. Now we'll go ahead and reconnect our ABS line. Now that we've got everything connected on one side, one more thing. You need to pop off this cap here at the top of the control arm over the ball joint. You can use a small flathead screwdriver. Just pop this up, and then you'll see that there's a grease fitting on top of the ball joint. That will need to be filled with grease before you actually operate the vehicle. That being said, now you can repeat this whole process for the other side. And that wraps up our review and install of the Rough Country 3-inch suspension lift kit with front M1 monotube struts and rear M1 monotube shocks for your 12 to 18 four-wheel drive Ram 1500. Thanks for watching, and remember, for all things Ram, keep it right here at AmericanTrucks.com.